quite an hour, probably 45 minutes. As Jonathan mentioned, I'll stop in between segments, and if you have any questions, we'll run through those at that time. So the learning objectives today, believe it or not, there are quite a few automatic doors. I know we all kind of think, okay, there's sliding, swinging, and revolving doors, but there are so many different doors and different applications within those different categories. So we're going to go through those and learn kind of when you use which door type and why. We'll talk about how to reduce misapplications. Like I mentioned before, it really will affect the end user if these aren't specified properly and sold properly. We'll talk a little bit about ANSI BHMA codes and concerns, and then we'll get into ATOM, which is the American automatic, oh gosh, I always say it incorrectly. The American Association of Automatic Door Manufacturers. There we go. I always get the first 3 A's confused. So we'll talk about that and what that means. So as I mentioned, there are, and I don't even think I realized this until I started giving this presentation, just how many different variations of doors there really are. So we have sliding doors, and within that category, there are single slide, biparting, and telescoping doors. There are swing doors, and then within that category, we have low energy and full energy or full pedestrian. There are revolving doors, 2, 3, and 4 wing. And ICU doors, even though they're manual, they fall under this automatic door category. And then there are bifolding doors, which we don't really see. 2 and 4 panel, we'll talk about that very briefly toward the end. So this is what your standard biparting door looks like. And I think we've all, if you've ever shopped anywhere in the United States, you have probably walked through a door that looks very similar to this. Walmart, Target, Home Depot, Lowe's, you know, just to name a few of the big box retailers, they all have kind of gone to this type of door as their main entrance. So again, like I said, within the sliding door category, there are a number of different door types. So the one that I just showed you is a biparting door. So you have 2 panels in the middle. Those 2 panels will slide over the stationary panels on either side. There's also a single slide door in which you have 1 panel that slides over a stationary panel. And it can be either a right hand or a left hand, just depending on which way you want to guide the traffic. Then we move into a telescoping single slide in which you have 3 panels total. 2 will slide over, they kind of stack and will slide over the 1 stationary panel. And then you have a telescoping biparting door, which is 6 panels total, 4 in the center move, the 2 in each direction go over the stationary panel on either side. So again, we'll kind of go into each of these in a little more detail, kind of talk about where and why you might want to use one versus another. So the benefits and considerations of a sliding door versus a swinging door is they're very aesthetically, they're clean. You know, they look a lot sleeker. They take up a lot less space. I think, I forget, there is some kind of metric. I think it's like 33% more space if you use a sliding door versus a swinging door. I don't remember exactly what that number is, but you do take up less space because you don't have those doors swinging into, you know, the path of where people are traveling throughout a business. They're good for 2-way traffic. You know, they open wide enough where you can have people coming and going all at the same time through the same entrance. And they're good for new construction. They're good for retrofit, but only in certain instances. And in most cases, they'll be fine. But if you're looking at a pair of 3.0 doors, swing doors that you want to replace with a sliding door, it does get a little tricky because of the size needed in order to have these sliding panels move out of the way and still get you a 32-inch clear slide opening. So that's where, you know, it won't work in every retrofit situation, but in most. So like I said, we really get into detail here and you really will see all of the different variations. So within the sliding door category, there are full breakout doors and fixed side light doors. And this really boils down to egress and how much clearance is needed to get people out of a building. And so while this isn't something that I will give an architect, I don't say, hey, you need this particular door. I usually will have them tell me what clearance they need or what space, what dimension they need, and then we'll determine which door they need. So in a full breakout, it's just that. All of the panels, sliding and stationary, can be broken out or they'll break away in an emergency. So that will give you, if you look at the top photo here, we've got a biparting door. So all 4 of the panels will swing open. They'll pop open. It takes, I think, 50 pounds of force to pop those doors open. They swing, and that will give you that whole clearance to allow people to egress. On a fixed side light, you only have the sliding panels that open and allow just those 2 panels to pop open. So a little bit less clearance there. Again, when I'm working with an architect and we're looking at which door to specify, I'll usually have them tell me what opening they need for breakout, and then we determine which door works best to give them that opening. Sometimes something to take into consideration, or sometimes I'll ask the question, if I'm working with maybe it's a car dealership or a medical office building, are you going to be moving big objects, cars, for example, or MRI machines? Are you going to be moving these objects in and out? Because even if the egress requirement doesn't justify having that larger space, sometimes we'll go ahead and use a full breakout door just to make sure that if they want to move, again, something like a car, MRI machines, sometimes with the grocery stores, refrigeration cases, things like that, we'll go ahead and use a full breakout door just so they can get those items in easily by just breaking out the doors rather than having to take everything down, which I've seen before. This is just kind of a diagram to show you that with this little chart down below, if you're looking for, hey, I need a breakout width that's at least 9 feet. So what size door do I need, or what opening do I need to have for my door? So knowing that you want a 9-foot breakout opening, you need at least a 10-foot door. And at the bottom here, there are there's like a mathematic equation, which I've had to bust out my high school or junior high, I should say, algebra, and actually plug in the numbers to figure out the equation here. So you can back into any one of these. If you're looking for a particular panel size, you can use this equation to figure out, okay, I need a panel this size. That'll tell me that I need a door at this size. So that's kind of nice because it's not as exact as 4 panels that are equal size, because you do have some overlap and some other things to take into consideration. So it's not as easy to kind of figure out without using a chart like this. All right, any questions up until this point? All right, so vestibules. Vestibules, there's a reason behind having a vestibule, and that is really to kind of mitigate the weather conditions coming through a building. And I like to tell the story. A couple years ago, I took my family to Arizona, and we were in northern Arizona where it's cold. We happened to be there during a snowstorm. It was still wintertime. They had gotten snow the night before, and we were sitting in the lobby area. I think it was a Hampton Inn, and they have, your continental breakfast, and we were sitting near the front doors. Their vestibule doors were spaced so closely that every time someone walked from the exterior door into the interior, both doors were hanging wide open. And it was just this tunnel, this wind tunnel of cold air coming in from outside, blowing right into all of us sitting, eating in the little breakfast area. So when a vestibule is being designed, it's really ideal to put enough space in between those 2 doors. So the recommendation is at least 12 feet between the doors, although you will see that most designs only have room for about 7'9". And we can kind of work with this space. If it's something like a 10-foot space, we can absolutely work with it. We just need to kind of play with the sensor ranges, because ideally what you want is for someone to walk from that exterior into that vestibule, and before they activate that second interior set of doors, you want the outside or the exterior set to already start closing. So again, you're really just kind of mitigating whether it's hot air coming in, wind coming in, or cold coming in. You really want to have those doors working together to really provide you with kind of protection from the elements outside. Otherwise, you've just bought 2 doors and created a wind tunnel and kind of doubled the price of what you really need. So again, like I said, we're really going to break down these doors because not only have we talked about, the different types of doors, fixed side light, full breakout, but now we have different ways of mounting or installing these doors. So there are 2 ways you'll see sliding doors installed. The first will be overhead concealed, and this is really the most common way you're going to see a door, especially if it's new construction and they've got plenty of room to design and install this door. You're going to see this where it's basically installed inside the jambs, inside all of the framing. We will see on occasion a little less attractive looking, but you will surface mount doors occasionally. And this is where you have, this looks like an existing space where they wanted to automate doors, but the space between this wall and this wall was probably too small to have a biparting door. They maybe had some sort of requirement that they were trying to meet a certain opening. And therefore, the only way they could do that without redesigning that whole opening was to surface mount a door to the existing walls. So you're basically using, here's another example. The picture is a little bit grainy in quality, but gives you the idea. You're basically utilizing the walls in lieu of side lights. So here, like I said, again, they've got an opening behind here. They want to utilize the wall instead of kind of configuring and redesigning that whole opening. I've seen it where the jambs on either side can be eliminated and you can mount, as long as you've got something structural behind this, you can mount the header right to a wall, and you can eliminate these jambs. There are a lot of ways you can do it, but this is one example. All right, so like a standard storefront type door, you'll see narrow style, medium style. There are what's called limited sightline doors available as well. And these are going to be a really small, usually you'll see about an inch style size framing around the door. So it kind of provides you that all glass look, but still having the door panels completely protected. This usually will provide you more protection from the outside elements versus a full top and bottom rail full glass door, which we'll look at in the next couple slides. But it's more aesthetically appealing because you have a smaller sight line. And it really, like I said, it gives you that all glass look, but still giving you protection from the outside elements. So this is what, I was referring to when we're talking about an all glass sliding door. So these are good. The limited sight lines can be used interior or exterior. While an all glass door, you want to be a little bit conscious of where you're using this. If it's on the exterior, and the reason that I say that is because if you look at this drawing here down in the bottom right, you see where the glass sits centered inside of this rail, and then the glass sits centered inside of this rail. And when the panels overlap, so when this sliding panel slides over the fixed light, you've got this gap in between where the glass panels are. So it's not the greatest solution for an exterior application, only because you have those gaps. Wind, dust, dirt, rain, snow, what have you, can all blow into a building because of these gaps. Now, there are different seals and brushes and things you can put on these glass doors. However, the whole intent behind the glass door is to just really make it beautiful and very minimal in hardware. And then you take this glass door and you start putting all these seals and all these things. It kind of distracts from the original kind of design intent behind it. So just something to take into consideration. I'm in California. I specify a lot of these here. As long as we're not in an area that's going to get a lot of wind or rain, if they've got a canopy and awning, some type of overhang, we're generally fine to use these. But those are the questions that I'll work with the architect on to ask and make sure that, we're not putting this into some place where it's going to be directly hit by the outside elements. All right. Any questions before I move into telescoping doors? Everybody's still with me. Okay, good.
I have a question, actually.
Okay, sure.
The limited sightline doors, it seems like that's following more of kind of a European approach where you're relying on the glass pane itself to provide, rigidity to the frame versus, more traditional storefront of, you're relying on a stiff aluminum frame and the glass is, within that. Are those appropriate for kind of heavier use or abuse environments?
Yeah, absolutely. So the drive system in the header is what's really going to determine. I mean, because if you think about it, the doors aren't going to get broken out very often. I mean, they might get broken out in emergencies or not in emergencies, rather, I'm sorry. They might get broken out for people moving things in and out, but really emergencies is what that breakout function is designed for. And that's where the door is really going to get pushed on and where you're going to see any kind of deflection with the glass. But for the most part, it's just going to open and close. And the drive systems on these doors, most sliding doors are made. All of the manufacturers make their drive systems capable of handling heavy traffic loads. So I would say the only reason to worry about the glass would be in a breakout situation. But even then, they are reinforced. You might have the corners welded, or they've got reinforcement threaded rods inside of those styles to help keep everything very supported.
So the sliding doors place a lot less stress on the glass than the swing doors.
Yes, correct. And really, when we're talking about, because I work with our glass doors as well, really, I would say the only glass door that you really have to worry about deflection on is if you're using just patch fittings on a pivoting door. And if you're going really tall, something over 9, pushing to that 10-foot range, that's really where deflection is going to be an issue, especially if you stay with like 1/2-inch glass. And we follow GANA, which is the Glass Association of North America, and they have kind of recommendations on what to do there. But it's really only patch fittings. As long as you have a bottom rail and a top rail, you're usually good to go with that. But again, each situation is different, and all of these doors, whether it's a limited Sightline, all glass, fully framed, no matter what it is on the sliding door category, everything will be weight based, and each manufacturer is going to have their own kind of limitations on what they can do. So we won't make a door too large or too heavy for a lot of those reasons. And mostly that goes with the drive system. Again, you don't want to put too much stress on a drive system, and you want those doors to be able to break out without being too heavy to where they just kind of drop on the ground below. Because once they get to that pivoting point, there's not a lot supporting them. And you just want to make sure they're not too heavy. So always stay within the guidelines, and each manufacturer will let you know what they can and can't produce.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, okay. Got a few in the chat here too. So the first one is essentially, does Dormacabo provide all the types of doors and applications that you're talking about?
So since this is an AIA, I want to keep everything generic. And at the end of the presentation, once we've concluded, then I can go through that question and get into it in a little more detail.
Sure.
Okay.
So the next one is, do any of the doors you're covering have connections to allow doors to open upon signal from the fire alarm system to bring in fresh air for venting and atrium space?
Yes. So these doors can be tied into fire alarm systems. They can be tied into a lot of different things. I mean, the basic answer to that question is yes, the controls can they're capable of doing a lot. And whether that's with certain access control, whether that's smoke or fire systems, whether that's connecting to a battery backup, or if you lose power, you want the doors to go into a full open position. There are a lot of different capabilities that these doors have. It would just depend on the specific situation and that particular manufacturer. Some things require additional relays. I mean, really inexpensive relays that can help sequence doors. There's a lot that can be done. Again, I think it would depend on which manufacturer's door you're using and what specific situation you're trying to work with. But there's very rarely been a situation that I've seen can't be done. Hopefully that answered the question.
All right, that's all of them.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So moving into telescoping sliding doors. So as I mentioned at the very beginning of the presentation, telescoping doors, you will either have a 3-panel or a 6-panel for a bipart. So these doors, I'm trying to think of, I don't know where everybody's at, but in California, it was California, I think it was Vegas and maybe Arizona. We had a grocery company come out. They were from England. They were owned by Tesco, called Fresh and Easy. If anybody remembers them, they were only here for a short time. Kind of a Trader Joe's competitor in nature, but they were a big fan of telescoping doors. And one of the reasons for that was that they had one opening. They had a smaller model, again, more like a Trader Joe's, a smaller model grocery store. So they would have just one opening for patrons to come in and out of that store. And that's one of the reasons why someone may look to have a telescoping door, is that you can have one door that really allows, it gives you a 33% greater clear door opening. And it really allows people to come and go in that same entrance without crowding one another. If you think about a Target store where you've specifically got doors going entrance and then you've specifically got doors for exit, this is a completely different model. You can have one door, gives you a really wide opening. People can come and go entrance and exit. Another reason that I've seen is I'll sometimes have architects come to me and they're like, hey, we want a 20-foot wide automatic door. So if you were to try and do a 20-foot bipart, it just can't be done. The panels would be far too heavy. They'd never be able to break out. The panels would be too heavy to open and close all day long. So one of the ways that we can achieve an opening that's really, really wide is to break up that width over multiple panels. Sometimes if you're looking at a small opening, I mentioned that kind of if you're pulling out a pair of 3-foot doors and you've got this small opening, the 3-foot opening won't work, but if you have something just slightly bigger, you have a small opening and you want to put an automatic sliding door in it, a telescoping single slide might be a way for you to put a smaller sliding door in that opening, but because the panels have been broken up over 3 panels, you now allow yourself a wider, clear slide opening. So when the doors are in the open position, you've now given yourself that 32-inch clear opening. So those are some of the reasons that you would use a telescoping door. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this on just based on like, hey, let's use a telescoping door because I like the look of it. I mean, you can do that, but I like to use the analogy that there are dually trucks, and dually trucks have a purpose. They can haul more, they're beefier, but you do have extra tires that you have to think about. So maintenance, wear and tear, it's going to cost you a little bit more to have a dually truck. The same concept or the same idea exists with a telescoping door. Because you have multiple panels, you have now more moving parts, you have more rollers, you have more bottom guides. So there can be more that on the service side of things will need to be replaced. Slight increase over the lifetime of the door, but just something to think about. There are more moving parts, therefore there are more things that could potentially go wrong with the door. So again, if you don't need it, I wouldn't say to use it, or just be aware that there may be additional costs for service down the road. So access control, I know we kind of touched a little bit on the fact that the control boxes within these systems are capable of doing a lot of things. Access control is one of them. So we can absolutely integrate access control into these types of doors with car key systems or with electronic solenoid locks. These are all ways to add electronic access control into these doors. So a lot of different options. Again, it really depends on the specific situation, but we can integrate a lot into these doors. I personally just started writing specifications for the whole country, so I have now been a little bit more exposed to the requirements of Miami-Dade County. I mean, I've always known that there are different doors that are required for that county, but I've now started to get more personal experience with it firsthand in writing these specifications. So out here in California, where I've spent the majority of my career, We don't have these requirements, but there are requirements in certain areas, and sometimes in Hawaii, where I've seen where you are required to provide a hurricane-resistant door. And most manufacturers will have this within their product offering. It just has different reinforcement. The doors can withstand different wind loads, higher wind loads, and they're glazed a little bit different. It's a wet glaze system versus a normal kind of dry glaze system, which is what we use on regular doors. Okay, so before we go into swing doors, are there any questions? All right, swing doors it is. So we've gone through all the different types of sliding doors. And now we'll get into swing doors, which there aren't nearly as many different types, but there are a few different types, and the differences are pretty important to know. So with swing doors, I'm sure everyone here is familiar with different handing of doors, in swing, out swing. I'm sure you all know this stuff. We do have simultaneous pairs, so they're going to swing in swing at the same time or out swing at the same time. You have independent pairs where they will work exactly as it states, independent of one another, and then egress doors. So just like sliding doors, there are different ways that you can mount swing door headers. So I would say probably the most common type is a surface applied header. The box goes above the door, it's surface mounted, the arm attaches to the door. It can be attached on either the outside or the inside, and you have either a push or a pull operation. There's a concealed installation where you conceal that header within the framing of the door, just like on a sliding door that we talked about. And then one of the newer kind of more popular, I would say, a great way to solve a lot of issues if you don't have somewhere to mount, or you're trying to conceal everything, or you've got an all glass door and you really don't want to mount an operator to it. We have the in-ground option. So these are gaining in popularity. I specify a lot more of these than each year than I have the year before. With the in-ground, I would say the one thing to be aware of is just, do you have enough depth to recess this? Do you have a post-tension slab? Those kind of things are going to play into whether or not you can use it. And whether or not this particular area is going to get a lot of kind of water. Years ago at Stanley, we put these in at the W Hotel on Hollywood and Vine, and Hollywood and Vine is where you have all the stars on the sidewalk of all the famous people, and they would pressure wash that sidewalk every night. And unfortunately, because these weren't installed properly, they didn't have the proper drain, weep drains that they should have. So the motors, or the whole unit, the whole operator was going bad on like a monthly basis. So you just want to take some of these things into consideration before specifying an in-ground operator. Okay, so here's the fun part. This is where we get into, where do you use a full pedestrian door or full energy operator versus a low energy operator? So the two exist. ANSI 15610 is for full energy doors. So these doors, I like to try and, because if you put the wrong one in the wrong place, it's going to create a lot of confusion and a lot of upset for not only the end user, but for the patrons trying to use these doors. So full pedestrian doors, I would say this is something where you're moving at fast speeds, you've got carts, luggage, that type of thing, and you're expecting that door to open automatically every single time. So Target is a really good example. Airports is another really good example. This is where, you're moving quickly, you've got your luggage or you've got your stroller or shopping cart, and you need that door to open quickly because you're coming at it with your shopping cart. And if it doesn't open fast enough, you're going to bang right into that door. So with these doors, because they move at fast speeds, some of the requirements are that you need safety devices and guide rails. So the safety devices are going to be sensors on the door panels themselves. And there are a number of different sensors that can be installed on the doors. There are some that look like this. These are kind of older technology where you have this full bar that will pick up anyone in the path of or in the swing of the door. There are some that are now a little bit prettier. They just go in the corner here. It's kind of a half semicircle sort of shape, and that will pick up anyone in the opening of the door. A bunch of different types. It really just depends on, you know, what look you're going for, but you can choose different sensors to go on the door. But you will need those sensors, and you will need these guide rails. And these guide rails are, I always thought, you know, I was always told, oh yeah, that's to keep people out of the swing of the door. And while that is true, it's also to help guide the traffic into that area. So with this, because you're purchasing sensors and because you're purchasing the guide rails, and that kind of bumps up the labor time to install all of this stuff, these will generally cost a little bit more. And it does not mean that this application is superior to anything. It's just this type of door provides a solution to a certain usage. With this is an example of if the door is being used for two-way traffic. So here we've got doors swinging into the building. So this is your entrance. This looks like a Target to me because this looks like the cart door in the middle there where they're going to push the carts and keep them in the center. But this is your entrance into the vestibule, and then this is your exit. So this is really guiding traffic one way. This example is for two-way traffic. So if you have a two-way traffic, full energy swinging door, this unfortunately is what you're looking at. You need to have these guide rails that extend 55 inches beyond the lead edge of the door when the door is in the open position. And I think we can all agree that this probably isn't visually the most ideal looking door. With this type of door as well, you can see that they've got the activation sensor here on this post or on this metal bar that goes across, because you need to activate the door with enough time so that it opens before you get to it. And if you're looking at something where, you know, they've got plenty of space here to mount that guide rail, but if this were, let's say this were a street, you know, and you didn't have the space to put the guide rail, then we run into some design issues, and our options are pretty limited. So that's, like I said, not exactly the prettiest situation here. So low energy doors. This is, if you think about a low energy door, maybe it's the lobby of an office building, maybe it's a senior living or skilled nursing facility where you just need it to kind of give you that ADA for mobility issues or for ADA compliancy, where you want this door available to those who need it. So if they can't open the door manually and they need to use the door automatically, you've got this low energy option available. And I would say 90% of the time we're doing low energy doors. And if you're going with a full energy door, most of the time designers, architects are looking to do a sliding door. So with this falls under ANSI 15619. With this, all you need is a knowing act, which is generally going to be a push plate or a touchless wave plate. And touchless wave plates have been all the rage since COVID started. Nobody wants to touch anything, and it's a great way to completely keep a door touchless. So you're going to use the wave plate or the push plate. That activates the door. The door takes about 5 seconds to open. It stays open for 5 seconds and takes about 5 seconds to close. So this really allows someone enough time using their walker, using a wheelchair. I know for me, when I had my 2 young kids and I had them in those awful double strollers, that gave me enough time to bump the button with like my hip, get the stupid stroller through the opening, and that 5 seconds was great. So with this is not, like I said, this is not an inferior application. This is just a different application in which you're providing an opening for those with mobility issues or those that need the extra help. With this, it doesn't have sensors. You don't need the guide rails. So you can, it generally will cost a little bit less. I won't go through this slide because I'm kind of running low on time here, but this just basically talked about everything that I said before. About 5 seconds to open, 5 seconds stays open, and then about 5 seconds to close. So if you think about that, that's really the determining factor. You know, will your client want that door taking about 15 seconds to go through that whole cycle? If the answer is no, people are going to be rushing in and out. You want to go with a full energy door. Activation. I know I said everybody has wanted to go touchless since COVID started. These are some of the ways that you can activate a door. You can use a card reader, a keypad. These are just a couple of the, I mean, there are tons of touchless wave plates out there. These are two of the examples. In the state of California, we're required to have a push plate in a high position and a low position. One of the ways that you can do that and make it look a little bit nicer is to use one of these full length bars, which anywhere along this 36-inch tall push bar, you can activate the door. Or just your standard circular or square push plate. But there are tons of ways. You can get really sophisticated, or you can use something as simple as one of these plates down here to activate a door. Anything that can send a dry contact signal to the door to stay open, that works. With swing doors, they're great for directional traffic. Like I showed you, Target uses them or used to use them. You go in one direction, you come out another direction. Rite Aid was another one, and they specifically had theirs designed to help with loss prevention. Good for new construction and for retrofit. With any door, we all know we need a 32-inch opening for anyone for ADA, so that people in wheelchairs or anything like that can get through that opening. Okay, so now we move on to revolving doors. So revolving doors also fall under the automatic door category. And while I don't feel like we see these as often as you see a sliding door or a swing door operator, you will see these in healthcare, airports, hotels, office building, and retail. With revolving doors, like any door, you will have a variety of styles. So you'll see here, you can get a narrow style, a wide style, an all glass, kind of a patch fitting style, or a Herculite where you're using a top and bottom rail. So depending on what aesthetic, these are very, very customizable. So depending on what aesthetic you're looking to achieve or match, there's probably a panel type that can be integrated into the wing design. A lot of times people ask, are these doors safe? You know, revolving doors, I think they have this misconception that they're not safe, but there are plenty of sensors on these doors. As you can see here, they all kind of will pick up on different things. I would say the one thing, if you're looking at a revolving door, to be aware of, manual revolving doors, you can do those in a variety of sizes and diameters. You can go with a smaller diameter, but when you go to an automatic revolving door, you really want to make sure that you have nothing less than like 8 feet. If you go with something much smaller, those compartments become much smaller, and then the sensors are constantly picking up on someone in that compartment. So again, these are kind of all the different sensors that help make sure that anyone inside that door in those compartments stays safe. There are two-wing revolvers. These you'll see a lot at airports, and you'll see them a lot in hospitals. And that's really, you've got these huge wings to allow people in gurneys, to allow wheelchairs, luggage, really just a lot more space. With revolving doors, these are truly the only door that is going to give you complete protection from the outside elements. So that's why you would really use a revolving door versus another type of door. You know, you may want the grand kind of aesthetic of it, and that may be the reason that the architect wants to use it, but they really are a climate controlled door, never really allowing the outside elements to come in. As we mentioned before, they're perfect for office buildings. They can integrate, same type of thing with any door. You can integrate card readers, optic scanners, keypads, all of that good stuff. Just like any automatic door, you have to have egress. So the revolving doors use a book folding mechanism. So the wings inside the revolving door, they will fold in, allowing egress to go on either side around so that people can exit. All right, anything on revolving doors? Okay. So bifolding doors. I don't know if any of you can recall ever seeing a bifolding door. I probably haven't seen one in years, and I came across one when I was in Hawaii, the hotel that we were staying at, they had them, and it kind of took a step back. I'm like, whoa, who uses these anymore? And there's kind of a reason behind that. If any of you have ever lived in a home or an apartment where you had a bifolding door over like a washer and dryer or in a closet, think about whether or not those worked and if they were broken, because most of the time it's just not a great design, and especially when you automate it and it's being used for high traffic, that folding is just not going to hold up over time. So they exist because there is a certain, if you have that, like I said, that pair of doors, that pair of swing doors that you're removing, this is probably the only door that will give you the clearance needed to go into that existing opening. They're just not the greatest design. They're not extremely reliable. They're not great for high traffic. If you had something that only had to open occasionally, I would say this might be a design. But as a whole, in the entire automatic door world, these are being used very, very, very infrequently across the board from every manufacturer. We get a report as to how many door types are sold every year from all the manufacturers. This type of door is almost never being used. There may be a niche in which you can use this, but it's very, very rare. So moving on to ICU doors and CCU room doors. As I mentioned before, they fall under the automatic door category, even though they're manual. There are a bunch of different types of ICU doors that are available. You have 2-panel, you have telescoping, you have one that's got a sliding door and a swinging door, you've got biparting, you've got some that are smoke rated, you've got some with positive latches. I would say if you're coming across these doors, really find out what the requirements are. Like in California, we have OSHPD, which is a whole kind of governing body that dictates different rules that apply just to healthcare in California. Whereas, most places you need a 32-inch opening. With OSHPD, I believe it's 44 inches. So I would find out what's required. They come in tracked versions, trackless versions. There's a whole menagerie of ICU and CCU room doors that are out there that exist. I would just make sure you know the requirements of it and find the manufacturer that can best help with that. And I wouldn't say that those are limited to just ICU room doors. We call them ICU room doors, but I get a lot of requests for a manual breakout door for a lot of different scenarios, and we use ICU room doors all the time for different scenarios. So they aren't limited, so just remember they're out there. Okay, this is where I got hung up before because I can never remember the order of the 3 A's. The American Association of Automatic Door Manufacturers. This is a group, this is a certification that installers and technicians should have. So in specifications, that should be a requirement that whoever's doing the installation or whoever's providing the door, that the installers and service technicians are ATTAM certified. And going through an ATTAM certification, it just teaches you, I've been ATTAM certified in the past, it teaches you the speeds, the torque, the force in which these doors open, sensor detection zones. It teaches all about the safety of how these doors should be installed. So when a door is installed, it should be ATTAM certified upon installation, and every time someone goes out and services that door afterward, they should always make sure that everything is in accordance with the ATTAM certification guidelines. Again, it helps with code compliance and protection of litigation. And I can tell you that I've sat in on many depositions and mediations. This does exist, and having an ATTAM certified installer really does make a difference when you're in those mediations and depositions. It really makes the difference. We've talked a little bit about the full pedestrian doors. That's for ATTAM or ANSI and BHMA 15610. So doors should all follow these standards for power operated pedestrian doors. The detection zones and the sensors that are used really this all has to occur. I wouldn't say that this really plays in a lot to design. The only time that a sensor detection zone plays into design is when we're talking about, kind of playing with those detection zones, still keeping them within what's required, but maybe pulling those in a little bit when you've got a vestibule, or sometimes I've seen within grocery stores, they'll have a bank within the grocery store. And usually that bank sits right next to the checkout lines in the bagging area. So you want to have maybe the detection zone pulled in, or maybe have a push plate in lieu of a sensor on the outside of that door, just so that people aren't constantly setting the door off over and over again. I like to talk about the Trader Joe's that's near me. When I exit their building, because that door sits next to their manager's stand, they have that sensor pulled so tight up against that door that every time I leave, I'm like, I'm for sure going to hit this door with a cart. I'm for sure going to hit it. And every time it opens right before I hit it. So they have that zone pulled in so tight, I think because they've got that manager's stand right there. So, that's where that can all be done. It doesn't play into the design. For the most part, that can all be done when a door is installed, just to make sure that, the natural flow of how people are moving through the building works with what that detection zone is. In the past, safety beams were used to help keep, the presence of people within the door kind of safety zone, making sure that the door is not opening or closing on someone. Sensors have gotten so sophisticated that safety beams aren't really used anymore. You've got sensors that can kind of do it all. They're motion, presence, all in one. Really sleekly designed. They're getting smaller and smaller so they don't look as bad on a door. So really, this slide, we don't really need to pay attention to this because safety beams aren't really being used anymore. We've got such sophisticated technology when it comes to sensors. Signage, unfortunately, you look at brochures on automatic doors and they all look gorgeous and beautiful, and you won't see any of this signage, but signage is a requirement. So all automatic doors will have to have signage stating that it's an automatic door, stating that you can push in an emergency to break open a sliding door. On swing doors, they'll usually be directional. It'll tell you, entrance or do not enter, just making sure that people are aware that it's an automatic door and aware, of directional traffic. All right, down to the last of it. So I know we've talked about everything, which doors to consider, why to consider which ones, things to think about. But one of the last things that I will talk about is service. So just like a car, I know we used the dually truck analogy earlier, but just like a car, if you never changed your oil, if you never rotated tires, if you never fixed the brakes on your car, you're likely going to either have a car that breaks down completely, or you're going to have, if you don't replace brake pads, you're going to, ruin the rotors on your car. Same type of thing with automatic doors. You really want automatic doors to be inspected twice a year just to make sure everything is running, sensors are still working, that you're not wearing down bottom guides, or that rollers aren't wearing down, because rollers, very much like tires and wheels and brake pads, if those rollers and bottom guides completely deteriorate, now they're scraping up tracks, and it's a lot more expensive to replace bottom guides and tracks than it is to just replace a bottom guide as it starts to wear and tear. And these things will wear and tear. I mean, it's just like a tire on a car. It'll wear and tear. They do need to be replaced. But just something to think about, that you do need regular maintenance on these doors to make sure that you keep them in kind of tip-top shape. Again, Adam certified technicians, make sure that you're using a company. Don't just think about the door itself, but think about who's going to service this door, and do they have good service coverage in the particular area in which the door is being installed. It's great that there's a fabulous door, but if there's no service coverage, that's really something that's going to play into the end user, especially if they've paid for a warranty, but they can't get coverage. Really something that the end user needs to be aware of. And really, it should go into the thought on whose product to use. And lastly, what we've talked about when choosing equipment. Make sure that you kind of understand the facility, if it's retail versus healthcare, the safety requirements and code requirements. You want to make sure that these doors meet all of those codes. Security, we've got a ton of options for locking and access control. What type of usage? Is it just going to get light use, medium use, heavy duty use, and pick a door accordingly. Everything is based on size and weight. If the door is too heavy, it will not open. If the door is too heavy, it's going to drag on the ground. And as we just talked about, requirements for maintenance, just making sure that these doors do get regular maintenance so that you can extend the overall life of that door. And we are done. And I think I allowed us enough time to where we can run through any questions, if anyone has any. But I thank you for your time.
All right, I don't see any questions coming through, but thanks to everyone who joined us. Thank you, Aubrey, for teaching, and I will send out a follow-up email to everyone with the recording, and reminder, if you haven't sent me your AIA number, please send that over, and we'll get you your continuing education credits for that. So again, thanks for coming, and we'll see everyone next month then. Thanks, Aubrey.
Great.
Thank you. I will answer. I don't know who
Thank you.
had the question, but since we've now concluded the AIA portion, I can answer the question that Dormicaba does have a complete line of automatic doors. We've got all of the sliding doors that were shown in this presentation. We've got all of the swing door operators, revolving doors, and ICU doors. So anything that you saw in this presentation, we have. We actually have a couple products that are not mentioned here. We've got a low energy all glass slider for interior spaces. So if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I'm happy to help.